This video is called What's Your Book About? Now, for all those of you out there who are writing a novel, you'll know the feeling where you've finally admitted to someone that you are writing and they say to you, "Oh, what's your book about?" And suddenly all you can come out with is a lot of gibberish or gibbering naffness, and nothing seems to make any sense. You say, well, it's about this girl and she's sort of trying to find what she needs, and she lives somewhere, I haven't quite decided, and there's this bloke, but then there's this other bloke, and before you know it, it's just a mess. And you need to be able to just say what your book is about. And the funny thing is, people can get to the end of writing a whole novel and still not be able to do that. And of course it is something you need to do. You need to be able to do it in a synopsis, which will be 1 or at most 2 pages of telling the whole story, and that includes the ending. And you also need to be able to do it for what in the UK we call the blurb, which is the bit of information that goes on the back of the book. Now, okay, when you get to the point of publication, you'll have help with that. But while you're trying to find someone to be interested in your book, whether it's an agent or a publisher or just your family, you need to be able to say what your book is about. And it's really using that little trick of a couple of paragraphs that just talk about the main essence of the book. You're selling the sizzle and not the sausage. The synopsis is the whole sausage, but that's another video. What we want to look at today is just being able to say what your book is about clearly. And for that you really need a few little ingredients. You need the main character. So decide who that is. Make sure you know who it is. If it's more than one person, if you're writing an ensemble piece, that's going to challenge you, but you still need to be able to identify who the story's about. Then you need your setting, and the setting will include time as well as place. You have to be able to allow people to visualise your story. So if it's set in the 17th century or in 19th century France or in contemporary London, whatever it is, you've got to get that across fairly early on in your explanation of what your book is about. Then you need to think about the problem. Now, we've talked in characters about how the character always wants something, and what makes the story is the obstacles that he has to overcome to get that thing. And this really is the same as saying the problem, or even the story question, it's sometimes called. So you need to think about what it is that your character is having to do, what makes them active, and that's going to have to go in your little blurb as well. Possibly you might add the main adversary or the villain of the piece. It's you can hint at them, you don't have to name them. Try not to put too many names in your little blurb, because it just confuses people. So if you're struggling to identify any of these things, you don't have a story yet. And I recommend you don't write another word until you've identified those things on that list. They're major pieces of information. I'm going to do this with one of my books to show you what I mean. So we'll have a look at The Winter Witch. You may or may not have read it. It doesn't really matter, because I'm now going to tell you what it's about. So The Winter Witch is about a mute young woman who is married off to a drover who needs a wife to hold his job as a head drover. It's set in wild mid-Wales in the 1830s. In her new home, Morgana discovers she has magic in her blood, and when a dark force threatens all she's come to love, she knows she must master her talents quickly to defend her man and her home, or she'll lose everything. That's what my book is about. It's not long, it's, that's 4 sentences, but it's got it across. So what I think you need to do with your own stories to help you focus on how you're writing them and to help get across to other people what they're about is to try and reduce books you've read to a blurb. So think of the last book you read and enjoyed. Try and do the same thing. Who's the main character? What's the setting? What's the problem? Can you get that into 2 or 3 sentences? Pin down the main ingredients, and then you can flesh it out into a couple of paragraphs. That's what you're going to do with your own story. What's quite interesting, if you use a famous book, try and reduce it to those 2 or 3 sentences. Would anyone else recognise the book from what you've written? And would you buy it? Now do that with your own story and ask yourself the same questions.